transgresses the constitutional rights of an Indian citizen. The affidavit claims that Priya Pillai would have endangered national interest by presenting a false picture of India, thus discouraging foreign investment and creating a global cascading effect. Are these valid reasons for stopping an Indian citizen leaving the country? Or are they high-handed, undemocratic and perhaps unconstitutional? That's the discussion in part 2. But first, the BJP-PDP are very close to an agreement on a common minimum program for the coalition government they want to form. But there are a few last-minute hurdles that still need to be resolved. These are Article 370, AFSPA and perhaps talks with the Hurriyat, as well as full state rights for Jammu refugees. So in part 1 we ask, can these hurdles be overcome, or could an agreement between the two parties remain elusive? And now joining me to discuss the BJP-PDP negotiations is the political editor of The Hindu, Varghese George, former Chief Information Commissioner and an expert on Kashmir, Wajahat Habibullah, BJP spokesperson Hina Shafi, and the well-known senior journalist and commentator Gohar Gilani. Varghese George, in a front-page article in your paper, The Hindu, yesterday, you said that talks between the BJP and PDP to formulate a common minimum program so that they can form a coalition government are facing last-minute hurdles. Before we go into details, let me ask you for an overview. What are the key issues that are proving to be a bit of a problem?
See, the issues that you just listed in your introductory remarks have been the problems in the last week or so. But of those issues that you named, I think the question of refugees who came in 1947, their full rights, statehood rights for them, I think that issue is more or less been resolved. The question of talks with the Hurriyat and engagement with Pakistan, both these issues have been more or less resolved. And I think the last minute, as of today, the sense that I am getting is that the formulation on Article 370 and what to do with AFSPA, the controversial law on which the BJP and PDP have really irreconcilable positions. I think these are the two last-minute stumbling blocks which still remain in the talks between these two parties.
Gohar Gilani, let's first take up Article 370, which defines the constitutional status of Kashmir. Its abrogation, as you know, is an article of faith with the BJP, although the party's most recent manifesto says that the step will only be taken after consultation with others. Now, the key question is, can the BJP agree to put this on the back burner for 5 years so as to form an alliance with the PDP, or would that damage the BJP's credibility? What's your answer?
I think given the verdict in the recent Delhi Assembly elections, BJP has already got some answers to the kind of politics it has been, involved in throughout all these decades. I think now compromising on its core ideology with regards to the Article 370, I think it will further damage BJP's own credibility and the way they fought elections in Jammu and Kashmir. And on the other hand, I think for the PDP, Mr. Mufti Saeed is aware, I think, he knows the legacy of Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah and once the tallest Kashmiri leader, and now there is 24/7 security vigil at his burial chamber after what happened in 1975, the Indira Sheikh Accord. So I think, now if you see it took almost 2 months, 56 days, and we don't have a government. So you can understand the kind of contentious issues that are being debated and what kind of politics is going on and how PDP wants to sell itself and, wants to appear as not compromising and engage New Delhi in a dialogue where PDP is seen as something which can go to the people of Kashmir with some sense of achievement.
I want to build on that answer, Wajahat Habibullah, because it's not just that the BJP has to put the abrogation of Article 370 on the back burner for 5 years, but they also, I believe, are being asked to do so in writing. The PDP seems to suggest that a simple verbal assurance wouldn't be sufficient. Now, is putting something like that, which is an article of faith for the BJP in writing, asking one step too many from the BJP?
Well, let me tell you Well, let me tell you what I have got as a feedback from my friends in Kashmir. I am told that the agreement is there, in fact. It is not insuperable, it is already there. But both parties would like to make clear to their constituents that they are actually taking a stand on issues which are sensitive to the public. And therefore they're making clear what their stand will be. So I don't think, Article 370 is hardly an insuperable problem. And if I may invite your attention to what the Prime Minister himself said on an earlier visit to Jammu, that he said the Article 370 needs to be re-examined, not abrogated. That is already a step taken beyond the question of abrogation, which was earlier the BJP stand. Then, during the election, again, it was not made an issue. Article 370, the abrogation of Article 370 was not made an issue. So it's hardly an insuperable problem.
Okay.
AFSPA, again, it's both the PDP and the BJP can come to a settlement quite readily, because its abrogation or its extension or its removal from certain areas depends neither on these two those parties. It really depends upon the army, and surely the two parties.
Let's stick to one subject at a time. We'll collapse into AFSP in a moment's time. Let's stick to one subject. Hina Shafi, you're hearing Wajahat Habibullah, who in his own right is not just an author on Kashmir but an expert. He's been divisional commissioner there, say that he doesn't believe Article 370 is an insuperable problem. You heard almost the opposite a moment ago from Kohar Gilani. Now, last year, when the BJP was fighting the Maharashtra election in September, it willingly put statehood for Vidarbha on the back burner, and I put it to you that that was an equally strong conviction which the party was prepared to put behind, or at least for a while put behind, so that it could win the Maharashtra elections. Now, on Article 370, there are many in Jammu who actually support its retention rather than abrogation. So here I ask the question, as it did in Vidarbha, could it agree for electoral reasons to put Article 370 on the back burner for 5 years?
I believe right now, the government formation, we are keeping everything aside. These things can be discussed when the government is formed. BJP never really pressed on abrogation of Article 370. As Gawhar Jilani said, like, it is always in the election and they're going to lose their credibility. We're not going to lose credibility if we talk about BJP is talking about abrogation of Article 370.
Can I interrupt you? Can I interrupt you? When you say that at the moment, as government formation has happened, they are prepared to put everything aside, and I think those are almost verbatim your words, are you therefore saying that BJP can put this issue aside for 5 years? It can put it on the back burner? Give me a clear answer.
No. It's not about 5 years. We can discuss it. It can be discussed, as we are always on the stand that we really want to discuss on Article 370. So let us form the government, and then the two parties can discuss it over.
So if I understand you, again I'm interrupting you. If I understand you correctly, you're saying it's not abrogation that you're insisting on, it's a discussion about Article 370 that you would like. And as long as PDP agrees to discuss it, that would be sufficient for you. Have I understood you correctly?
Definitely.
All right, thank you very much. That is an important clarification. It's discussion of Article 370 that is the key for you, not abrogation. Varghese George, let's then come to the second issue, which is the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Your paper, The Hindu, says that the PDP wants, first of all, immediate withdrawal from certain areas of the state, and after that, it wants complete withdrawal within 1 year. Now, conceivably, immediate withdrawal from certain areas of the state could be something the BJP agrees on, but is the PDP flexible on the complete withdrawal within a year demand?
I think perhaps they should be, because if there can be an agreement on removal of AFSPA from some districts where it is never used or it is hardly required, I think there could be a possibility of the BJP accepting to that idea, and the PDP actually taking a step back from the current demand and for the formulation that there has to be a 1 year time-bound plan for a complete revocation or removal of the AFSPA. I think on that point, the PDP would be in a position to do some kind of compromise.
You know, Gaur Gilani, I want to build on what you've just heard from Verghese George, and please remember that Verghese George is perhaps the only journalist in the country who's interviewed Mufti Saeed, and so maybe he has a clear understanding of the PDP chief's thinking on this issue. There is speculation in the papers that the two parties are using the word withdrawal rather than revocation because withdrawal sounds more temporary. Additionally, there is also speculation that the common minimum program could contain a clause which says that if withdrawal turns out to be the wrong step, AFSPA would be immediately reimposed. Do you think A, that sort of language, and B, that additional clause could work to bring both PDP and BJP to some agreement on this issue?
I don't think it will work on the ground, primarily because of two reasons. One, I think, when people will see that PDP has even failed to revoke the AFSPA, which has been the long pending demand of many sections of the society, then it leaves a space for alternative politics in Jammu and Kashmir, like the Kejriwal model, because NC we saw the same promises were made by the outgoing Chief Minister Omar Abdullah when he took over as the Chief Minister, and then he couldn't do anything. And now if the PDP also fails to revoke AFSPA, this gives a clear message to the people of Kashmir that it's actually the army's, army's diktat that works, and it is the Indian army which decides things for Jammu and Kashmir, and not these leaders and parties which are elected by the people in these electoral processes. And second, I think this common minimum program is now, it appears that it is becoming confusion mein party, not common minimum program, because clearly there's a lot of debate, lot of contentious issues. PDP, as we know from the sources, is insisting on writing all these things on paper in black and white, and not just these verbal assurances.
Okay, let's accept one thing, Wajad Habibullah, that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is not just a contentious issue in the valley, it's a deeply emotional issue. And we also can accept that the PDP would lose huge ground if concrete and visible changes in the imposition of AFSPA didn't happen once it comes to power. On the other hand, if, as Verghese George suggests, the BJP agrees to an immediate withdrawal from certain areas, and then there is no insistence on a complete withdrawal within 1 year, you will have, at least in those certain areas, concrete visible steps. Would that be sufficient for the PDP to convince its Kashmiri electorate that it's delivered, even if not everything, at least something that's sufficient?
Karan, I think you're oversimplifying, and I would disagree with my young friend Gauhar that you see the question of whether the army dictating because the AFSPA is continued. The army is deployed on condition of the AFSPA. The army has had to be deployed in J&K for reasons that we all know, and the terms of its deployment are the AFSPA. Now, therefore, if the AFSPA, and I've written about this quite extensively both in my book and in articles for the Indian Defence Services Institute, the question is that if the AFSPA is to be continued or not continued, it really depends on how the army deals with it.
You're slightly missing the point of my question, so I'm interrupting you. Forgive me. The point of my question. Let me restate the question, Wajad, because I think it's critical.
I understand your point. Let me come to it.
But come to it quickly, please.
Let me come to it. I understand your question.
Come to it then, please.
Yes, if I may come to it, the point is that the revocation of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is not really the issue. The presence of the military presence in areas which are civilian areas, where it is not required, and you will have to continue the AFSPA in those areas if the civilian presence continues over there. And if the civilian presence if the military presence is reduced there and extended in areas where it is also needed. And these, I'm telling you, not on the basis of my own analysis.
No, but can I interrupt, because you're slightly confusing us with the wealth of detail you're giving, so I'm going to ask you to simplify your answer, because everyone is not an expert on Kashmir as you are. The point I want you to answer is this: would an immediate withdrawal from certain areas be sufficient for the PDP to say to its constituency, we have delivered concrete results on AFSPA, or would it be essential to go an additional step and ensure a complete withdrawal within a year? Answer that specific question.
Well, I will. That is correct. it will serve that purpose. There are other ways of doing it. Now, I won't go into the other ways of doing it, but the fact is that if it is done in certain areas, then in that area, certainly it will be looked upon as a delivery. That's why I said to start with, that these points, I feel, have really been agreed upon between the parties. But the PDP and the BJP would like to make clear to their constituents that they have stood up
I
for
take your point that your sources are telling you these points have been agreed upon. Your sources may be privileged and well informed, but other people's sources are saying that in fact there are still hurdles and obstacles, and we're doing this program on the assumption that the other sources who are indicating obstacles perhaps are more accurate than yours. Forgive me for that. Hina Shafi, I want to take up this point about the army's influence and role in determining what happens to AFSPA. Because it's not just Gohar Gilani who mentioned it a moment ago. The Indian Express says, and I'm quoting from today's Indian Express, that the BJP has argued that the army is a stakeholder in the future of AFSPA. And therefore, the army must be consulted. Now, it's no secret that if you consult the army, they won't even agree to an immediate withdrawal from certain areas because they've already said they don't want that. And they certainly won't agree to a complete withdrawal within 1 year. So if you then make this dependent on what the army says, could AFSPA become a deal breaker?
See, first of all, PDP should have not taken this thing for the election. That we will try to remove AFSPA from the certain areas. Well, they did, and it's too late to say they shouldn't have done it. The reality you face is they did. So now answer on that basis. The reality is something different. It is an act, and we have to get the army in between, and the central government has to play a very important role. So I think things will slowly, they'll be lenient in few areas. I won't say like there'll be a withdrawal of the act, but there will be a leniency.
But hang on a second. If you're going to consult the army and get their approval before there is even that leniency in certain areas, and you're making it clear it may not be a withdrawal, just leniency, then what happens if the army doesn't give its approval? Because up till now, the army position made repeatedly and publicly is they don't believe even a withdrawal in certain areas is acceptable. Now, are you making leniency something substantially less than withdrawal, or is it just a euphemism for withdrawal? Perhaps that's the question I'm asking you.
You know, earlier it was never picked up by any of the parties, neither it was in the manifesto that AFSPA will be withdrawal or something. So I think like both the parties are working on that, and very soon results will come out. Either there'll be a withdrawal, who will agree for the withdrawal, or there'll be a leniency in some parts.
You're using that word leniency in a tantalizing fashion. Will Mr. Modi, in a sense, crack the knuckles of the army chief and army leaders and say, look, boys, you have to agree to what I call leniency. Your insistence that there should be no withdrawal, even from certain areas, is no longer acceptable. Will he take a hard line with the army?
No, it is not the leniency like where we don't need them at present. Earlier, if we compare the situation few years back and now, we don't need where they should be, you know.
But will the army agree to that, or will Mr. Modi force the army to agree? That's the question.
No, Mr. Modi doesn't force anybody for doing anything. So now I think it's going to be in a discussion, and soon, I think in 2-3 days, everything will be resolved.
All right, we're left with a slightly inconclusive answer on this one. Wajad Habibullah believes that it's already sorted out, and he's wagging his finger to suggest that his line is correct. You're saying that Mr. Modi will persuade the army, but as I said to you, the army's made it clear that perhaps this is an issue on which they cannot be persuaded, so maybe Mr. Modi will have to force the army. We simply don't know what will happen. Let's leave it to the future to determine. Let's come instead, Verghese George, to the third issue, which is the status of those who crossed over from Jammu, from Pakistan to Jammu in 1947. Now, the BJP wants full state rights for them. You believe that this is an issue where the PDP could be flexible, presumably in return for some equivalent accommodation on 370 and AFSPA. And certainly the Indian Express says, and I'm quoting them, PDP leadership isn't averse to being flexible. So do you think this is really not a problem at all? This is something that they can trade quite happily, provided they get something in return?
I doubt, because I think this is one issue that PDP perhaps think that is very, very highly sensitive in the valley. and any formulation that could actually trigger yet another wave of protest. In fact, some of the PDP interlocutors I've had an opportunity to talk today, they even went to the extent of suggesting that tampering with that point at all could actually lead to a situation which happened during the Amarnath land row. So I think the PDP would be very, very cautious, and it will be, I would even say, it would be very, very wary of making something which would be interpreted as a compromise.
This is very interesting, Varghese. You're saying to me that contrary to the Indian Express belief that in fact the PDP leadership could be flexible, you think that this is an issue that could become a bit of a flashpoint between them.
I think the BJP would be flexible on this issue. I think the BJP may not insist on that point. From whatever feedback that I got from the BJP is also that, okay. I mean, I did not get a specific feedback on it, but a BJP leader I spoke to, he said that is no longer a contentious issue. I am not very sure whether who's made the compromise. Or,
that's again very interesting. If there is a compromise happening,
but I've been told that that is no longer a contentious
issue. This is interesting. Your hunch is that if there is a compromise happening, it's the BJP that's making the accommodation, not necessarily the PDP. Now, Gaur Gilani, one area where clearly the BJP has taken steps to facilitate a PDP demand is the opening of talks with Pakistan. The Foreign Secretary, under the disguise of a SAARC Yatra, will in fact be visiting Islamabad. Bilateral issues will be discussed, and Mufti Saeed has publicly welcomed that. The issue that remains is the question of talking to Hurriyat. But given that Mr. Advani and Mr. Vajpayee quite happily did it when they were in power, would this really be a sticking point for Mr. Modi? What's your answer, Gaur Gilani?
I think with regards to Mr. Narendra Modi's telephone call to Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, I think we also have to look at the American angle. It was Mr. Obama's visit where he talked about many things, and then on way back he also talked about religious intolerance in India. And you saw today's Modi's statement where he clearly mentioned that India belongs to all religious, all people who belong to many religions, he talked about tolerance and other things.
But come to Hurriyat, so come to Hurriyat, not Pakistan. Pakistan is a done deal. Come to Hurriyat. Do you think Mr. Modi can bite the Hurriyat bullet?
Coming to the Hurriyat, I think it will be very important for the PDP to convince the BJP for conducting talks with the Hurriyat, because otherwise they will not be able to sell their common.
The point I'm asking is, will it be difficult for PDP, given that Mr. Vajpayee and Mr. Advani held talks with Hurriyat, would it be a problem for Mr. Modi to do the same?
I think on the hindsight, it appears that it is for the first time that any political party from Jammu and Kashmir has actually engaged New Delhi, and not the otherwise, which used to be the trend that New Delhi would engage political parties from Jammu and Kashmir. So I think PDP has in some way played it smartly until now, but it remains to be seen whether the results are clearly as we know from the sources. But if it will be mere rhetoric, then God save them.
Vijay Thabir, I want to bring you in on that point. You've repeatedly said that your sources have actually led you to believe that on most of these issues an understanding is sorted out, but both parties need to reassure their constituents that they're not letting them down. So it's a question of presentation, it's a question of language, but the essential core agreement has been reached. How confident are you that your sources are correct? Because if your sources are correct, then this is almost as good as signed and sealed. It's just a matter of time before it will be.
Well, let me tell you about my conversation with the young Mirwais Umar Farooq.
But Mirwais Umar Farooq has nothing to do with this.
No, Mirwais Umar Farooq is the Mirwais and the head of the Hurriyat.
Oh, you're talking about the specific talks of Hurriyat. Okay, go ahead. Quickly answer that.
So, the Mirwais Umar Farooq, I was not talking about Umar Abdullah.
No, I know, but I was not talking about just talks with Hurriyat. I was talking about the overall belief that you have that on all these contentious issues.
Let me tell you about the Hurriyat.
Very quickly, because I'm running out of time. I need a short answer, not one of your long ones.
Okay. At that time, his question he had put to me is that would Mr. Modi be willing to to carry on the place which had been left by Mr. Vajpayee, and after that, the Prime Minister himself in his speeches has repeated the words of Mr. Vajpayee of talking about resolution on the form of insaniyat. So there have been steps taken forward in that direction, and therefore I would not apprehend that this should be a breaking point. On the question of the resettlement of refugees,
because I'm running out of time.
That strikes very clearly. That deals very clearly with the question of Article 370. And if Article 370 is agreed upon,
let's not go back to Article 370. I know you're fond of giving detailed answers which complicate people, but we've handled Article 370. I'm not going to unwind it and unravel what we've achieved. So leave that aside. No, I'm going to Hina Shafi for the last word, because I need someone who'll actually play ball with me and focus on the subject rather than transgress, as I'm afraid you're doing at the moment. The PDP has said, Hina Shafi, that the importance of the dialogue that is happening is that this is the first time Srinagar and New Delhi are talking. Secondly, the PDP has also told the Indian Express that a Mufti-Modi alliance, against the background of the fact that Kashmir is India's only Muslim majority state, will change the way the Modi government is viewed both by minorities in India as well as internationally. Do you see this dialogue in the same light? Are you therefore seeing it in the same way as they are? A quick answer.
I'm really happy at least Mufti Saeed is accepting that Kashmir is the integral part of India.
He always did, by the way. He never denied it. You forget that he was in fact the Congress party president in Kashmir. So don't cast aspersions on him. Come back to my question. Come back to my question.
Yeah, I think it's really going to work, but not giving the importance to the Hurriyat or the separatist. We are ready to talk about the sensitive issue about the Kashmir, not the importance, giving the importance to the Hurriyat or the separatist.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. There's a clearly positive note being sounded by Hina Shafi and Wajaz Habibullah. A lot more caution, cynicism from Varghese George and Gohar Gilani. This is an issue where we still have to know more before we can be certain that it is a done deal. But one thing is for sure, whether slowly or more rapidly, we are moving, I hope, in the right direction. My thanks to all my guests for joining me.